Part 1. The Compass That Shouldn't Work. The morning Mira Vasquez found the compass, she wasn't looking for anything magical. She was looking for her left sneaker. It was the first day of summer break, and her bedroom looked as though a tornado had developed opinions about where clothing should go. Shirts hung from her desk lamp. Books formed a small mountain range across the floor. Her cat, Admiral Biscuit, sat on top of the highest peak, looking very pleased with himself. "Admiral, have you seen my sneaker?" Mira asked. Admiral Biscuit blinked his golden eyes slowly, which either meant yes, or I am a cat, and your problems are not my problems. Myra got down on her hands and knees and shoved her arm under the bed. Her fingers closed around something round and metal, warm to the touch even though the morning was cool. She pulled it out, expecting the sneaker. Instead, she found a compass. It was about the size of a biscuit tin lid, with a dark brass case that had turned greenish-brown in spots, like old pennies. The glass face was scratched but clear. The needle inside was deep red, and it wasn't pointing north. Mira knew it wasn't pointing north because the window in her room faced east, and the needle was pointing directly at the window. "Weird," she said. She turned around slowly. The needle moved with her, always pointing at the window. She walked to the window and looked out. The street was quiet. Mr. Patterson was watering his roses. A dog was sleeping on a porch 3 houses down. There was nothing unusual about the direction the compass was pointing. Nothing except the fact that there was no compass rose on the face of the instrument. No N for north, S for south, E for east, or W for west. Instead, there were 4 strange symbols she didn't recognize. A wave, a star with 6 points, what looked like a little flame, and a crescent moon with a tiny door drawn in it. The needle was pointing at the crescent moon symbol. "Mira," her mother's voice floated up the stairs. "Breakfast is ready. And have you seen your grandmother's old compass? I was looking through the attic boxes last night, and I can't find it." Mira looked at the compass in her hand, then at the window. "Found it," she called. Abuela Carmen's compass had a story. Most of her grandmother's things did. Abuela Carmen had been born in a small coastal town in Colombia, had traveled the world as a marine biologist, and had collected so many strange and wonderful things that when she passed away 2 years ago, it had taken Mira's whole family 3 weekends to sort through everything. The compass had come from a sailor named Rodrigo, who claimed to have found it at the bottom of the sea. That was the story. Anyway, Abuela Carmen had always laughed when she told it, the kind of laugh that meant she knew more than she was saying. "It points to whatever you've lost," the sailor had supposedly told her. "Not just your keys or your wallet. The important things. The things that matter." Mira's mother had put that story firmly in the charming old nonsense category. Her mother was a scientist, a person of facts and figures, and she did not believe that a compass could point at lost things. But Mira was 11 years old, and she believed in a great many things that couldn't be measured. At breakfast, she set the compass on the kitchen table and watched it while she ate her toast. "It's pointing at you," said her little brother Theo, who was 7 and noticed everything, whether you wanted him to or not. Mira looked at the needle. He was right. It was pointing at her. "Maybe you lost yourself," Theo said thoughtfully, and went back to arranging his cereal into shapes. Myra picked up the compass and held it in her palm. After a moment, the needle swung away from her and pointed steadily toward the kitchen window, which faced north, toward the old harbor. "I haven't lost anything," Mara said. But even as she said it, she thought of Abuela Carmen's voice, warm and low, telling stories on rainy afternoons. She thought of the smell of her grandmother's house, a mixture of sea salt and old books, and something sweet she'd never been able to name. She thought about how, sometimes at night, she still reached for her phone to call her grandmother before remembering. Maybe you had lost something and couldn't even see what it was. The compass needle trembled, then pointed north, toward the harbor. The lighthouse. Mira had lived in the town of Pelican Cove her whole life, which meant she had passed the old Hartwell Lighthouse approximately 943 times without ever really looking at it. The lighthouse stood at the northern tip of the harbor, on a rocky outcrop that jutted into the sea like a stubborn chin. It had been decommissioned, which was the official word for turned off and abandoned, 30 years ago when the new automated light was installed. The Hartwell Lighthouse was old, paint-peeled, and surrounded by a chain-link fence with a sign that said danger, no entry. It was absolutely the kind of place Mira was not allowed to go. She stood in front of the fence at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, having told her mother she was going to the library, which was also near the harbor and technically not a lie because she had been near the library on her way here. In her left hand was the compass, its needle pointing like a finger directly at the lighthouse door. In her right hand was a granola bar, because she'd been in enough trouble before to know that adventures were better with snacks. There has to be another explanation, she told herself. There was a gap in the fence, half hidden by a wild rose bush that had grown over the chain link in a cascade of pale pink flowers. The gap was just big enough for an 11-year-old to squeeze through if she didn't mind getting a few thorns in her hair. She minded, but she went through it. Anyway, the lighthouse was bigger up close. The door was heavy old wood, warped and salt-stained, with an iron handle shaped like an octopus. The octopus handle had 8 arms, each one ending in a tiny suction cup, and the whole thing looked far too detailed and odd to be ordinary. Mira pressed her ear against the door. She heard something. It was faint, very faint, but unmistakable. The sound of a place full of things. A shuffling, rustling, whispering sort of sound, like the sound a library makes when everyone in it is reading at the same time. The compass needle spun once, like it was excited, then pointed straight at the octopus handle. Mira reached out, took hold of one of the octopus arms, and pushed. The door swung open without any resistance at all, as if it had been waiting for her. She had expected dust. She had expected darkness, spiderwebs, maybe a few pigeons. She had not expected color. The inside of the Hartwell Lighthouse blazed with it. From the moment she stepped over the threshold, Mara was standing in what appeared to be the inside of a completely different building, or perhaps a different world. The stone walls of the lighthouse curved upward, yes, and the spiral staircase wound toward the light chamber above. Yes, but every surface was covered, not with graffiti or peeling paint, but with things. Shelves, hundreds and hundreds of shelves spiraling up the walls from floor to ceiling, each one crammed with objects, old toys and new ones. Umbrellas with bent handles and umbrellas still wrapped in plastic, hundreds of single gloves, a stuffed elephant missing one button eye, a battered harmonica, a wedding ring nested in a teacup, a library card, a very old letter still folded in its envelope, a child's drawing of a horse that might have been a dog, 1,000 mismatched socks, and light. Warm amber light filtered from above and from curious lanterns placed at intervals along the shelves, making every object glow like something in a museum. "You came," said a voice. Mira spun around. Sitting in a large wooden armchair beside the door was a boy she had never seen before. He looked about her age, perhaps a year older, with dark brown skin, a head full of tight black curls, and the most enormous pair of spectacles she had ever seen on a person's face. The spectacles had round lenses and copper rims and gave him the look of a very studious owl. He was holding a clipboard, and he appeared to have been expecting her. "Who are you?" Mira demanded. "Ezra," said the boy. "Ezra Okafor. I'm the keeper's assistant." He said this with great dignity, as if keeper's assistant was the finest title a person could hold. "What keeper? What is this place?" Ezra uncrossed his legs and stood. He was taller than she'd expected. "This," he said, gesturing broadly at the overwhelming collection of objects around them, "is the lighthouse at the edge of lost things. Everything in here was lost, genuinely, truly lost, by someone somewhere. The lighthouse finds it and brings it here." Mira stared. "That's not how lighthouses work." "No," Ezra agreed pleasantly. "But it's how this one works." He held out his hand. "May I see the compass?" Mira tightened her grip on it instinctively. "How do you know about the compass?" "Because it used to belong to the previous keeper," said Ezra, "and when a keeper is gone, the compass finds the next one." He paused. "You were close to the previous keeper, weren't you? You loved her very much." Mira felt something squeeze in her chest. "My grandmother." Ezra nodded, his expression becoming gentle. "I'm sorry. She was extraordinary. She kept this place for 20 years. He looked at Mira seriously. "She always said her granddaughter would be the right person to take over. That you had the gift." "What gift?" "The ability to feel which lost things are important, to know when something needs to go home." He pointed at the compass in her hand. "The compass brought you here because this lighthouse is in trouble. Something very important has gone missing from the collection. And unlike the objects on these shelves, which are simply waiting to be claimed, this missing thing is needed urgently, right now, by someone who is suffering without it." Mira looked at the compass. The needle was spinning slowly now, as if searching. "What's missing?" she asked. Ezra took a deep breath. "A story." Part 3. The world inside the collection. "A story," Mira repeated flatly. "A story is missing." "Not just any story," Ezra said. He led her toward the spiral staircase, climbing past shelf after shelf of lost objects. "Come on, I'll explain everything. Mind the third step. It wobbles." Mira stepped over the third step and followed him up. As they climbed, she noticed the objects becoming less ordinary. The everyday things, keys, gloves, small toys, gave way to stranger items. A glass bottle containing what appeared to be a tiny, complete sunrise. A music box playing a song she'd never heard but somehow recognized. A sealed jar labeled "First Laugh" in neat handwriting. A small wooden box labeled "The Dream I Almost Remembered." "These are," she began. "Lost moments." Ezra confirmed. "Lost feelings. Lost pieces of people's lives. The lighthouse doesn't just collect physical things. It collects anything that's been truly lost." He stopped at a shelf and pointed to an empty space, conspicuously empty, where a fine layer of golden dust still sparkled. "That's where the story was. You can see where it rested. Objects that have been here long enough leave an impression." The empty space on the shelf was about the size of a shoebox. The dust around it shimmered in the lantern light. "Whose story was it?" Mira asked. "It belonged to a boy named Felix Drummond," said Ezra. "He's 12 years old and he lives about 3 miles from here, in the blue house on Anchor Road. He lost his story 6 months ago. Well, he lost his ability to tell stories. He used to write them, dozens of them. These wild and wonderful adventures he'd share with his little sister. She has a rare illness, and she spends a lot of time in the hospital. Felix's stories were..." Ezra paused, searching for the right words. They were the thing that kept her brave. Mira felt the squeeze in her chest again. And then he stopped. He couldn't write anymore. The ideas just stopped coming. His sister gets scared at night in the hospital, and Felix visits every day, but he doesn't have any stories to tell her, and it breaks him a little more each time. Ezra looked at the empty shelf space. His storytelling gift is here somewhere. It was brought here by accident. It wasn't supposed to come here at all. Sometimes the lighthouse makes mistakes. Things get swept up in the collection that are needed elsewhere. That's why the keeper exists, to identify and return the things that don't belong here. So I need to find the story, Mira said slowly. The story, the gift, really. It's not a book or a piece of paper. It's more like a light. You'll know it when you see it. Ezra looked at her carefully. But there's a complication. There always was. The object, the gift, was brought here 6 months ago. Things that have been in the collection for that long begin to settle in. They make friends with the other objects nearby. They become part of the community. Sometimes, when you try to take them, he struggled for the right word. They resist, Mira guessed. They hide. Ezra said, they embed themselves deeper in the collection. We'll have to go into the deeper levels to find it. He pointed upward, and Mira realized the staircase went much higher than it should have for the outside of the lighthouse. Far, far higher than the actual lighthouse tower could possibly be. How big is this place? She asked. Bigger inside than out, said Ezra simply, as if this were not a deeply shocking fact. Welcome to the collection. They climbed for what felt like miles. The shelves on either side of them grew increasingly fascinating. Myra found herself stopping every few steps to look at something. A tiny snow globe containing what appeared to be an entire Christmas morning. A bronze key labeled the door I was too afraid to open. A child's shoe with a note tied to it that read Sophie's first steps. Age 11 months in faded ink. They're all so sad, she said. Not all of them, Ezra said. See that green bottle? That contains the smell of a particular bakery in Paris that closed in 1987. The owner's grandchildren found it here and came to claim it. They brought the whole family. It was quite a day. He smiled at the memory. And that musical box there, it contains the lullaby a mother used to sing to her son every night when he was small. He's 60 years old now, and he thought he'd completely forgotten it. When he came and heard it again, he said it was the best day of his adult life. Mira touched the edge of a shelf gently. They get claimed. That's the whole point. Objects come here. And when the time is right, the person who lost them, or the right person to have them, comes and takes them home. He paused. Or sometimes a keeper brings the object to the person who needs it, like what we're trying to do now. The keeper, Mira said. My grandmother was the keeper. Yes. For 20 years she managed this collection, returned lost things to the right people, made sure nothing important went unreturned for too long. Ezra glanced at her sideways. She talked about you constantly. She taught me almost everything I know. And she told me that if I was ever in real trouble, I should use the compass to find the next keeper. She hid it under your bed before she died. Mira stopped walking. She hid it. On purpose. She knew you weren't ready yet when she first became ill. She thought you needed a bit more time to grow. Ezra's voice was careful. She used to say that the best keepers are the people who know what it feels like to lose something that matters. Mira thought about that for a long moment. The loss of her grandmother had been a deep ache in her chest for 2 years, like a bruise that never quite healed. She hadn't thought of it as something that might make her better at something. She looked at the compass. The needle was spinning faster now. "We're getting warmer," she said. Part 4. The Deep Collection. The deeper levels of the Lighthouse collection were different from the ones near the entrance. Down below, things had been organized and labeled. Up here, above the 6th level, objects mingled freely in a cheerful chaos. Books leaned against strange musical instruments. A bicycle hung from the ceiling next to a cluster of balloons that had clearly been floating for decades without deflating. A child's drawing pinned to a shelf had been adopted by a family of tiny silver birds who had built a nest in its frame. "The silver birds aren't real, are they?" Myra asked. "Define real," said Ezra. The birds regarded her with tiny, intelligent eyes. "Point taken," she said. There was a sound from somewhere deeper in the collection, a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on wood. Myra stopped. "What's that?" Ezra hesitated. "That's Bernard. Bernard, the collection's guardian. Every deep collection has one. He appeared about 50 years ago. No one knows exactly where he came from, but he's been protecting the deeper levels ever since." He cleared his throat. "He's a bit territorial." The tapping grew louder, and louder, and louder, until it resolved itself into the sound of footsteps, very large footsteps, and from around a shelf of forgotten musical scores emerged what could only be described as a library on legs. Bernard was approximately 8 feet tall. He appeared to be made entirely of objects. Old books formed his torso. His arms were made of long-handled umbrellas folded together. His legs were stacks of suitcases, and his head was a magnificent old globe, the kind with a brass base, tilted at a slight angle so that the Pacific Ocean was where his forehead should have been. His eyes were 2 large old pocket watches, their hands spinning slowly and seemingly at random. He looked at Myra with his pocket watch eyes and made a sound like a foghorn. "Hello, Bernard," said Ezra with remarkable calm. "This is the new keeper. We're looking for Felix Drummond's storytelling gift. We think it came in 6 months ago." Bernard made another sound, lower, more thoughtful. One of his umbrella arms reached out and pointed down a narrow aisle between towering shelves. "He says it's in the room of voices." Ezra translated. "I didn't hear him say anything. He speaks in the old language. I've been here for 2 years. I've picked up most of it." Ezra patted Bernard on his nearest umbrella. "Thanks, Bernard. We'll be careful." Bernard made a sound like a question. "Yes," Ezra said. "I believe she's ready." Bernard turned his globe head and regarded Myra with one ticking pocket watch eye. Then, very slowly, he bowed. Myra bowed back. Bernard stepped aside to let them pass. The room of voices was not a room, exactly. It was more of a wide space between shelves where the air itself seemed to be full of something, a thickness, like the feeling before a rainstorm, charged and trembling. The objects here were different. They didn't sit still. They glowed faintly, each one pulsing with a soft light in different colors: gold, blue, green, a warm rose pink. "These are all lost gifts," Ezra said quietly, as though raising his voice might disturb them. "Creative gifts, abilities, talents. They come here when people lose faith in them or when circumstances force them away." He pointed to a small blue flame hovering inside a glass jar. "That's someone's lost confidence in painting. They were good once. And that golden thread, that's a musician who stopped believing in their own voice. Mira looked around. The room was full of floating, glowing things. Flames and threads and clouds and sparks. It was the most beautiful and heartbreaking place she had ever been. "How do we find Felix's?" she asked. Ezra held out the clipboard. "His was described to me by your grandmother's notes before she died. She'd begun cataloging recent arrivals and noted it as, here, he found the page. A small warm light, golden orange, that smells of wood smoke and sounds like laughter when you hold it close." Mira looked at the compass. The needle pointed to her left. She walked slowly down the aisle, passing the floating blue flames and silver threads, the drifting feathers of lost artistic courage. She moved carefully, not wanting to disturb anything, feeling oddly that she was walking through a room full of sleeping people. Then she saw it. It was small, smaller than she'd expected, about the size of a closed fist, and it hovered near the floor behind a stack of old sketchbooks, half hidden, as if it had wedged itself there on purpose. It was golden orange, like the light of a campfire seen through a window, and it pulsed with a slow, heartbeat rhythm. Even from where she stood, she could feel the warmth of it. She took a careful step toward it. It moved. Not fast. It didn't bolt. It simply drifted a few inches further back, behind the sketchbooks, out of reach. "It's shy," Ezra warned. "They all get shy after a while. They forget they belong somewhere." Mira crouched down so she was at the same level as the little light. She set the compass on the floor beside her. "Hey," she said softly. "I know this might feel safe here. I know you've been here a while, and you know all these other lights, and you've settled in. But there's a boy who needs you. He has a little sister, and she's frightened at night, and he can't help her because he lost you." She paused. "You were never supposed to be lost. Someone needs you. And you were made for stories. Don't you want to go and be a story again?" The little light pulsed once, twice, then slowly, tentatively. Like a dog hearing its name across a park, it drifted forward. It floated directly to Mira's outstretched palm and settled there with a warmth that started in her hand and spread up her arm and through her chest. And for one glorious second, she felt the fizzing burst of an idea. A wild, wonderful idea for a story about a lighthouse at the edge of lost things, about a boy with round spectacles, about a guardian made of books and umbrellas and suitcases. Then the feeling faded to a gentle warmth, and the light rested quietly in her palm. "Oh," she whispered. "Oh, that was wonderful." She held it. Ezra said, and his voice had gone strange and odd. "Your grandmother always said it took her 3 visits before she could hold one without it slipping through her fingers. You did it your first time." Mira looked at the little light in her hand. It was warm and steady now, not frightened, just waiting. She carefully cupped both hands around it and stood. "Then we need to get it to Felix," she said. Part 5. The climb down. Getting back down through the collection was, if anything, harder than climbing up, because now Mira was carrying a glowing gift in her cupped hands and couldn't hold the railing. "Bernard will walk you down," Ezra said. Bernard appeared at the end of the aisle, his globe head tilted at an attentive angle, and held out one umbrella arm. Mira looked at it doubtfully, then tucked herself against Bernard's side, and the great guardian carefully shepherded her down the spiral staircase, step by step, his suitcase legs moving with surprising gentleness. As they descended, Mira noticed things about the collection she'd missed on the way up. There was a system to it that wasn't immediately obvious, not alphabetical or by date, but by something harder to name. Objects that had been lost for similar reasons seemed to cluster together. Things lost to sadness were near things lost to distraction. Objects lost to carelessness were near objects lost to chaos. And in certain spots, she noticed empty spaces with fine golden dust, like the one where Felix's gift had been. Other things that had been found and claimed and taken back to where they belonged. Ezra, she said, as they passed a shelf of old diaries, what were you doing before you became the keeper's assistant? Ezra was quiet for a moment. I was lost, he said simply. Muir waited. Not literally, he said. I mean, I came here to find something. I'd lost my best friend. Not to death. His family moved across the country, and we were both terrible at staying in touch, and after a while it was like the friendship had just evaporated. I missed him every day and didn't know what to do about it. He adjusted his enormous spectacles. Your grandmother found me sitting outside the lighthouse gate. She said I looked like someone who needed a project. She was right. He paused. What I'd come to find was already here. An old note my friend had written me in 3rd grade, a silly drawing of the two of us as pirates. The lighthouse had kept it safe. Your grandmother let me claim it. He touched his breast pocket. I still carry it. Did you find your friend again? We're email pals now, Ezra said and smiled. It's not the same as having him nearby, but it's something. Mira felt the warmth from Felix's gift pulsing gently against her palms. She thought about what she told the light in the room of voices. You were never supposed to be lost, and wondered if that was true of some feelings too, and some friendships, and some parts of people. Bernard deposited her safely at the bottom of the staircase with a low, resonant foghorn sound that she was fairly sure meant good luck. Thank you, Bernard, she said. He bowed. The Pacific Ocean dipped graciously. Part 6. The Boy on Anchor Road. Ezra had a bicycle. It was the kind of bicycle that shouldn't still work. An ancient 3-speed with a bent fender and a basket on the front that was held in place with 3 different kinds of string. But it worked fine, and he pedaled steadily while Mira sat in the basket with her hands cupped around Felix's gift. This is extremely undignified, Mira said. Yes, Ezra agreed cheerfully. But it's faster than walking, and I only have one bicycle. The afternoon light was turning golden as they rattled along the harbor road, past the fish market and the old cannery and the row of houses with boats parked in their driveways. Mira watched the little light in her hands. It had settled into a rhythmic pulse now, almost like breathing. Anchor Road was 3 streets back from the harbor, a quiet street of houses in various states of cheerful disrepair. The blue house was at the far end, a faded cornflower blue with white trim and a garden that had clearly been very tidy once and was now on its way to becoming something wilder. A rusted basketball hoop hung over the garage. A boy was sitting on the front steps. He was about 12, with dark curly hair and the look of someone who had recently tried to sleep and failed. He was holding a notebook open to a blank page, just staring at the blank page as though hoping something would appear on it by itself. Ezra braked the bicycle and they came to a stop at the end of the path. Felix Drummond, Mira called. The boy looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. He'd been crying, maybe, or just hadn't been sleeping. It was hard to tell. Yeah. Mira climbed out of the basket, carefully, keeping her hands cupped. She walked up the path toward him. My name is Mira. I know this is going to sound strange, but I found something that belongs to you. Felix looked at her hands. He couldn't see anything in them, she realized, to anyone who wasn't connected to the lighthouse. The little light was invisible. There's nothing there, he said without cruelty, just flatly, the way you speak when you've been disappointed enough times that you've run out of energy for hope. I know it looks that way, Mira said. She sat down on the step beside him, not a polite distance away, but right next to him, the way her abuela would have done. But I need you to hold out your hands. He looked at her for a long moment. She could see him thinking about it, deciding whether this was some kind of prank, or whether she was strange in an interesting way, or just strange in a regular way. He held out his hands. Myra, carefully opened her palms above his. The light fell. It didn't fall like water. It fell like a word, coming back to you after you'd struggled to remember it. Sudden and right and warm. Felix blinked. His whole body went still. The notebook in his lap rustled its pages, even though there was no wind. Then he looked up at her, and his eyes were wide. "What was that?" he whispered. "That was yours," Mira said. "It got lost. It's back now." Felix looked down at the notebook. His hand moved to pick up the pen that had been sitting beside him. He began to write. Myra and Ezra watched in silence as the pen moved across the page. Felix wrote quickly, the words tumbling out faster than he could seemingly contain them, his face changing as he wrote, the tiredness and flatness shifting, replaced by something brighter, something focused and alive. He wrote 3 pages before he looked up again. "Oh," he said. "Oh, oh." He seemed unable to find the right words, which was funny given what had just happened. "I've missed this so much. I didn't know. I didn't know what it was I'd lost. I just knew something was gone. I felt it like a hole." "I know," Mira said. She did know. She knew exactly. Felix looked at her. "Why did it go? Where was it?" Mira thought about how to explain. "Sometimes things get lost because of what you're going through," she said carefully. "Not because of anything you did wrong. Your gift got swept away when things got hard. It happens." She paused. "But it was always yours. It was just waiting somewhere safe until you were ready." Felix looked at the pages he'd written. "Lily's going to the hospital for another treatment on Thursday." His voice was careful, controlled, the way you speak about things that scare you when you're trying to be brave. "She loves my stories. I couldn't. For 6 months, I couldn't give her anything." "You can now," said Ezra gently, from the end of the path. Felix looked at Ezra and then back at Mira. "Who are you? How did you know? How did you know to find me?" Mira looked at the compass in her pocket. "It's a long story," she said. "Appropriate, probably, given where your gift lies." She stood. "Write something for your sister. Something good." "I will," said Felix. He looked at the notebook in his hands with an expression that Mira recognized, the look of someone who has found something they were afraid was gone forever. "I will." Part 7. The Storm and the Second Task. Mira thought that would be the end of it. One task, beautifully completed, and then back to normal life. She was almost to her own front door when the compass began to spin. Not slowly and thoughtfully, the way it had been spinning. It spun like a top, needle blurring, and the case grew warm and then hot against her palm. She looked at the sky. The sky had gone a very dark and interesting gray to the northwest, the kind of gray that precedes the kind of storm that gets named in weather reports. She'd heard something about a storm on the radio that morning, but hadn't paid attention. Now the compass pointed west, inland, away from the harbor, and began to vibrate. She called Ezra. He had given her his phone number, which she had saved in her contacts as keeper's assistant. "Lighthouse." He answered on the second ring. "I feel it too," he said, before she could speak. Something came in the storm. Just before it. Big storms sometimes carry things, emotional things, the kind of losses that happen during emergencies. The lighthouse brings in a lot this time of year. His voice was serious. "The compass is telling you There's something that needs immediate return, something that can't wait. Mira looked at the darkening sky and then at her house. Through the kitchen window, she could see her mother starting dinner. Theo sitting at the table doing his homework with great reluctance. "I have to be home for dinner," she said. "How long?" She thought about it. "An hour. Then we move fast." They met at the corner of Harbor Street and Main. Ezra on his bicycle, Mira at a run. The first fat drops of rain had begun to fall, and thunder was muttering in the distance like someone grumbling about the weather. "The compass is pointing toward the Crestwood estate," Mira said, looking at the needle. The Crestwood estate was a large old property on the western edge of town, the kind of house with an iron gate and a winding driveway that had always seemed to Mira to be the sort of house where things and stories happened. "Do you know anyone there?" Ezra asked. "Not personally." She squinted at the compass, but the needle is very certain. They reached the estate gate as the rain began in earnest. The gate was open, not wide open, but ajar, as though someone had gone through it in a hurry. Mira could see lights in the house. From one of the upper windows came a light that flickered in a way that suggested, possibly, a candle. The compass pointed at the front door. They ran. Mira knocked at the door, a great brass knocker shaped like a lion, and waited. Thunder cracked overhead. Lightning lit the garden. The door opened. Standing in the doorway was an old woman. She was very tall and very thin, with white hair braided over one shoulder, and the bearing of someone who had once been used to giving orders and hadn't entirely gotten out of the habit. She was wearing a very good coat and holding a very ordinary umbrella, and she was looking at Mira with sharp, pale gray eyes. "I wondered when you'd come," she said. "I'm sorry," said Mira. "The Lighthouse sent someone." The old woman looked past Mira at Ezra, then back at Mira. "I was Evelyn Hartwell once. Evelyn Hartwell Crest now, since I married, but the lighthouse was built by my great-great-grandfather." She looked at the compass in Mira's hand. "Come in out of the rain. I'll explain." Evelyn Hartwell Crest, it turned out, was 91 years old, drank her tea without milk, and had a memory like a steel trap. She told them her story over tea in a sitting room full of framed photographs and the smell of dried lavender. The house creaked in the storm, but warmly, the creak of an old house that has weathered many storms and is not concerned about this one. "My brother David built something once," she said. "He was 12 years old and he built a model ship, an exact model of our great-great-grandfather's lighthouse keeper vessel. Every plank in place, every tiny rope rigged correctly. The light in the little lighthouse on deck actually worked with a battery smaller than your thumbnail." She looked at a photograph on the mantelpiece. A young boy holding a boat grinning. "He was going to give it to our father, who was very ill that year. He wanted to give him something beautiful and handmade." She paused. The storm knocked a branch against the window. "He never gave it," she said quietly. "The day he finished it was the day our father died. He put the boat in a box, and he put the box away, and he could never bear to look at it afterward. He said that it represented everything he'd wanted to give and never got to." Her voice was steady, but her hands, Mira noticed, were very still. "When David himself died 15 years ago, I looked for the boat. I searched his house from top to bottom. It was gone." "To the lighthouse," Mira said. "I assumed as much. I've known about the lighthouse since I was young. It's a family secret, or was." She looked at Mira. "David was never able to give the boat to our father. But it doesn't mean our father never deserved to receive it." Mira felt something click into place, like the last piece of a puzzle settling in. "You want the boat to be given to someone who represents what it was meant for." The old woman nodded once, decisively. "There's a young man, my great-grandnephew Marco. He's 9 years old, and he and his grandfather, David's grandson, haven't been able to connect. His grandfather is like David was. He finds it hard to express what he feels. Marco feels it, even at 9. He feels the distance. Evelyn set down her teacup. If Marco could give that boat to his grandfather, if there were a way for him to give a gift that carries all the love that was never expressed, it might be the bridge they both need. The compass needle was steady and sure. We have to go back to the lighthouse, Mira said. Part 8. The Night Collection. Going back to the lighthouse at night, in a storm, was very different from going in the afternoon. The gap in the fence was harder to find in the dark. The wild rose bush lashed in the wind. The sea was loud and close. Mira could feel it as much as hear it, a deep rumble in her chest. But the lighthouse itself was warm. When she pushed open the octopus door, the amber light of the collection spilled out onto the wet rocks, and the sound of all those objects, that soft, rustling, whispering sound, was still there, steady and unchanging, indifferent to storms. Bernard was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. He swept his umbrella arms in a welcoming gesture. "We need a specific object," Mira told him. "A model ship made by David Hartwell, approximately 70 years old. It would have come in about 15 years ago." Bernard's pocket watch eyes spun. He turned and moved up the stairs with his surprising suitcase-like grace, and Mira and Ezra followed. He led them not to the deep levels, but to a mid-level shelf around the fourth turn of the spiral staircase. Here the objects were older. The lights were softer. The dust was finer, and there was a hush like a museum at closing time. Bernard stopped and pointed. On the shelf, perfectly preserved, sat a model ship. It was extraordinary. Mira had expected a toy, but this was a work of art, every plank hand-fitted, the ropes no thicker than thread and precisely knotted, the sails furled with a miniaturist's patience. On the deck of the ship, behind the wheelhouse, was a tiny lighthouse, and inside the lighthouse, when Mira leaned close, she could see the faintest glow of a tiny light. The battery still worked. After 70 years. She picked it up with both hands, feeling the weight of it. The real weight, the physical weight of old wood and brass and glass, and underneath it another kind of weight, the weight of all the love that had been put into making it and all the love that had never been given. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, you're going home." Part 9. The Bridge. It was Ezra's idea to make it an occasion. You can't just show up at Marco's house at 8 o'clock on a stormy night with a mysterious boat, he said. There needs to be context. "I know," Mira said. "I need Evelyn." They went back to the estate. Evelyn Hartwell Crest, still immaculate at 91 in the storm, made 3 phone calls. Within 40 minutes, Marco and his grandfather, a large, quiet man named George, with David's eyes and an older face, arrived at the estate in matching expressions of slight bewilderment. Marco was 9 and serious, with a small face full of large thoughts. He shook Mira's hand when they were introduced, which Mira found endearing. George looked at the ship when Evelyn showed it to him. His face changed. Something in it broke open, just a little, like a window being cracked for the first time in years. "Uncle David's," he said. "Your great-great-great-uncle's," Evelyn confirmed. "He never got to give it. But I think he would have wanted the tradition to continue." She looked at George. "He would have wanted this family to get better at giving what we feel, George. He never managed it. You don't have to make the same mistake." George looked at Marco. Marco, to his credit, looked steadily back. "I found something," Mira said carefully, setting the ship on the table between them, "that I thought you might want to have." She said it to Marco, but she looked at George. There was a long pause. Then George reached out and picked up the ship. He turned it in his large hands, examining every plank, every rope, the tiny lighthouse on the deck. His eyes were full. "Marco," he said, and his voice was gruff, the voice of a man who didn't use it for soft things often enough. "Your great-great-uncle built this for his father to show him that he loved him." He set the ship down and turned it to face his grandson. I'm not good at saying things. I've never been good at it. But I love you the way David loved his father and never said, the way this boat says it. I want you to have it. Marco looked at the ship for a long time. Then he looked at his grandfather. Then, without saying anything, because some things don't need to be said, he leaned forward and hugged the large, quiet man, and George's arms came around him in that immediate, instinctive way of people who love someone and have been waiting for permission to show it. Mira looked at the compass in her hand. The needle was still. Part 10. What was never lost. It was late when Mira finally got home. Very late. She'd had to call her mother, who was not pleased, and had pedaled home through the last of the storm with rain in her hair and mud on her shoes, and the compass warm in her pocket. She expected to be in trouble. She was, in fact, in quite a lot of trouble, and had to sit through a very reasonable and thorough lecture about safety and honesty, and letting people know where you are. I know, she said. I know, and I'm sorry. But, Mom, I need to tell you something. Her mother looked at her. In her expression was the particular look of a parent who suspects their child is about to say something that they can't dismiss. Myra told her everything. She told her about the compass and the lighthouse and Ezra and Bernard and Felix Drummond and Evelyn Hartwell Crest and the model ship and the story of George and Marco. She told her about the room of voices and the soft golden light and the feeling of an idea passing through her hands. She told her about Abuela Carmen, about the 20 years of keeping, and the stories she'd heard, and the fact that her grandmother had hidden the compass under her bed on purpose. Her mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Show me the compass." Myra put it on the table between them. The needle, very slowly, turned until it was pointing directly at Myra's mother. Her mother looked at it for a long time. Her face went through several complicated things. Finally, she said, in a voice that was carefully level, "What has your grandmother left behind for me, then, do you think?" "I don't know," Myra said honestly. "That's what I'm going to find out." She went back the next morning. Alone? This time. Ezra was there, as always, with his clipboard and his enormous spectacles, but she went into the collection on her own, climbing the spiral staircase with the compass in hand. She let the needle lead her. It took her higher than she'd been before, past the room of voices, past the mid-levels, past shelves she hadn't seen. She found herself on a level that had a different quality to it, quieter, warmer, with a soft light that was almost rose gold. The objects here weren't lost in the ordinary sense. They were things that had been left, deliberately, knowingly, by people who wanted them to be found by someone specific. There were other things, she noted. A folded piece of paper with a name on it in handwriting she recognized. Letters. A photograph in a small silver frame. A carved wooden bird, small enough to fit in a palm. The kind of thing made over hours with patience and love. She picked up the photograph first. It was of herself and her grandmother at the beach, the summer before Abuela Carmen got sick. Mira was 7. She had her eyes shut against the sun and was laughing at something. Her grandmother had one arm around her and was also laughing, her white hair loose in the sea wind. On the back, in her grandmother's handwriting, "The best afternoon of a lifetime of good afternoons. Save this for when you need to remember you are loved." Mira sat down on the floor of the lighthouse, in the warm, rose-gold light, and held the photograph for a long time. She wasn't crying, not exactly. Or maybe she was a little. But it wasn't the kind of crying that hurts. It was the kind that feels like something releasing, like a door opening in a room that's been closed for too long. She picked up the folded paper. Her name was on it, in the same hand. She opened it. My Mira, by the time you find this, you will have already discovered that you are a keeper, not because of the compass, but because you have always been one. I see it in the way you notice things, the way you remember what others forget, the way you care about lost things, not just your own, but everyone's. I have been keeping the lighthouse at the edge of lost things for 20 years. It is the most important work I have done, more important than any discovery I made in science, because this work is about people, what they lose, and what they carry, and what they need to find again. I want you to know 3 things. First, the gift you have is real. Trust it. Second, keeping means you will sometimes feel the weight of other people's losses as well as your own. This is a heavy thing. It is also a privilege. Hold it with care. Third, and this is the most important, I am not lost. I know you know this, but I want you to read it in my handwriting. I am not in the collection. I am not missing. I am in every afternoon that was good and every story that was wonderful and every time you feel brave when you weren't sure you could be. I have not gone to be lost. I have gone to be part of all the things that aren't. The lighthouse will look after you, and Bernard will keep the deep collection safe, and Ezra is the finest assistant I have ever had. You are ready. You have been ready. I love you more than the sea loves the shore, which is stubbornly and forever. Abuela Carmen. P.S. The left sneaker is under the laundry basket. Part 11. Becoming the Keeper. Summer took on a different shape after that. Mira established a system. She went to the lighthouse on Tuesdays and Thursdays after lunch, and on weekend mornings if there was something urgent. Ezra taught her the cataloging system her grandmother had developed. Objects were logged in a large leather book with entries that included what the object was, who had lost it when it came in, and what level it had been assigned to. She was good at it immediately. Not perfect. She made mistakes, once misidentifying a lost feeling of courage as something more complicated and sending it back 2 levels too low. But she learned quickly, and the compass helped. The compass was, she came to understand, not just a finder. It was a guide. When she held a lost object and let herself go still, the compass helped her feel its history, who had loved it, why it mattered, and where it needed to go. It was like reading, but with your hands and your chest instead of your eyes. Her mother came to the lighthouse twice in that first month. She brought Theo once. Theo, to no one's surprise, greeted Bernard as though he were a large and friendly piece of furniture, patted the nearest umbrella arm, and asked Bernard whether he liked cereal. Bernard responded with a foghorn sound that Ezra translated as something like, I have never tried cereal, but I appreciate the spirit of the question. He's great, said Theo. He grows on you, said Ezra. Mira's mother was more cautious about the collection. She walked through it slowly, with her scientist's habit of looking at everything twice. She stopped in front of a shelf on the 3rd level for a long time, in front of a small terracotta pot that held a single dried flower. That's my mother's, she said. It was hers, Mira confirmed gently. She left it for you. It's yours to claim whenever you're ready. Her mother stood there for a while longer. Mira stood beside her and didn't say anything, because some moments need space. Eventually, her mother reached out and took the pot from the shelf. She didn't cry. She just held it in both hands the way you hold something you thought you'd never see again, and she and Mira walked back down the stairs together in the warm amber light. Part 12. The Lighthouse in the World. The summer stretched on, long and eventful and full. Felix Drummond finished his story collection, 12 stories, hand-illustrated, compiled into a book his mother helped him print at the library. He brought a copy to the Lighthouse, which Mira accepted on behalf of the collection. She put it on the third-level shelf, not in the lost things section, but in a small wooden cabinet Ezra had built for just this purpose, a cabinet of given things. Things brought to the Lighthouse not by loss but by gratitude. It was, she thought, the nicest smelling cabinet in the whole collection. George and Marco were seen frequently on the harbor, George teaching his grandson to tie sailing knots with the patience of a man who has finally realized that teaching your grandson things is also a way of saying I love you. The model ship sat in a place of honor in Marco's bedroom. Evelyn Hartwell Crest, who it turned out was a retired maritime lawyer, wrote a legal document that transferred stewardship of the lighthouse grounds to Mira's family in perpetuity. Family tradition, she said firmly, and signed it in a hand that didn't waver. Ezra began to talk, with increasing frequency and excitement, about eventually attending university to study preservation science. Because, he said, understanding how to keep physical things safe teaches you a lot about keeping intangible things safe. And vice versa. He wrote his first application essay about the collection. Mira was pretty sure he'd get in. Late on the last day of August, when the summer was turning gold and the evenings were beginning to carry the first edge of autumn cool, Mira sat on the rocks outside the lighthouse and watched the sun go down. She had the compass in her hand. Its needle was still, for once, pointing at her, as it sometimes did in quiet moments, which she had come to understand was its way of saying everything is where it should be. She thought about her grandmother's letter. I am not lost. She thought about Felix's sister, who was doing better after her recent treatment. Felix had reported this with a kind of quiet, fierce relief that only comes from loving someone very much and being scared for them. She thought about Marco and his grandfather in their boat on the harbor. She thought about her mother and the terracotta pot, which now sat on the kitchen windowsill with a new flower growing in it.